Welcome to Everyday Musicality, the podcast in which we discuss all things related to Gordon's music learning theory and how it can help unlock the inner musician that lives inside of all of us. I'm your host, Heather Shouldice, music educator and faculty member for the Gordon Institute for Music Learning. In this episode, I talk about rhythm skills learned at the partial synthesis level of the skill learning sequence. Hello and welcome to the Everyday Musicality podcast. I'm here 2 weeks later with a new episode just like I promised, even though I have to admit, this week is our spring break at my institution, Eastern Michigan University, and I really had the urge to just binge watch shows all day long, and I fought it. I'm forcing myself to record this new episode for you, just like I promised, because this is going to be one of my goals for 2024. If you're new to the podcast, you can listen back a couple episodes ago where I talk about how it had been a long time since I had recorded any episodes, and that for this year, I'm going to do something because something is better than nothing. So yet again, I am going to attempt another unscripted episode today. In case you were wondering, that was my 8-year-old singing the podcast intro music today. She happened to have her spring break last week, and I had to drag her with me to class, and we happened to be talking about uneven meter in class. So I had her help me sing the podcast theme song, and today when I picked her up from school, I told her I had to record a few final things for this episode, and she asked if she could sing on the podcast today. So that is my 8-year-old. Before we get into the topic, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that the Gordon Institute for Music Learning, one of the sponsors of this podcast, offers summer professional development levels courses. These are 2-week courses that are offered all around the United States, and they're offered in different specialties. Those include early childhood music, elementary general music, instrumental music, piano, and our brand new choral music track. I'm going to link to the GIML website in the show notes of this episode where it lists all the offerings for 2024, and registration is open. This summer, in order to meet the needs of teachers who start their school year in August, all of our levels courses will be offered from mid to late June through mid-July. So we've got pianos level 1 and 2 being offered at Eastern Michigan University. Also at Eastern Michigan University, we will be offering early childhood level 1. If you're interested in early childhood level 2, that will be taking place at Michigan State University. If you're interested in instrumental training, we're offering the instrumental course at the site, which is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This is the furthest west in the U.S. we've ever offered a PDLC through GIML, and that site will also be offering elementary general level 1 and choral level 1. Choral will also be offered at the University of Delaware in Newark, Delaware, and that site will be hosting, in addition to the choral track, an elementary general level 1 track. And finally, for the first time ever in Texas, I believe, we're also offering an elementary general level 1 track at the University of Houston. So that is super exciting. I know definitely we have some listeners in Texas because several listeners have emailed in with questions and comments. So Texas people, now is your chance. It's going to be a great group of faculty, and that goes for all of our sites across the U.S. We have so many experienced and knowledgeable faculty members that part of the thing that makes our PDLCs unique is that each course has 2 instructors. One person specializes in the theory of music learning theory, and then the other one specializes in the practical applications of the theory. And truth be told, most GIML faculty are approved to teach either the theory or the practical applications, and they do tend to interweave them. But the point being is that each site includes 2 folks that you get the opportunity to learn with, to try things with, and to ask questions of. So check that out. Again, I'll link to the Gimel page on the show notes where it will list all of the offerings for 2024. And it really is good if you know you want to attend a site, it's good to enroll early. Register early because then the sites will have an idea of whether or not they will be financially viable. Unfortunately, these courses are not run to make money for Gimel. They're run with the goal of just breaking even. So unfortunately, there is not a lot of financial wiggle room. These courses are planned with a minimum number of participants that are necessary in order for the site to be financially viable. So the earlier you register, the sooner we'll know that those courses indeed can run. One more quick thing I wanted to mention before we dive into today's topic, and that is related to my book, Weaving It All Together, A Practical Guide to Applying Gordon's Music Learning Theory in the Elementary General Music Program. It's available through publisher GIA Publications, and I'm mentioning the book because I'm thinking ahead to the future and anticipating a second edition at some point. Mainly because I've already noticed a number of errors in the first edition, as well as things that will be changing in regards to learning sequence activities. If you're not familiar with what learning sequence activities are, I've done episodes in the past all about learning sequence activities, which we commonly refer to as LSAs. I'll link to those episodes in the show notes. The quick definition is that learning sequence activities are a specific, very focused and sequential type of pattern instruction in music learning theory designed to take place during the first 5 minutes or so of the music class or the music lesson. And in these LSAs, students develop a variety of musical skills at all levels of the skill learning sequence. We'll talk about that skill learning sequence in just a moment. So my book, Weaving It All Together, in addition to giving an overview of Gordon's music learning theory, the core tenets, the different tonalities and meters we might use, the basics of pattern instruction, and then I really dig into the different levels of learning of the skill learning sequence. Woven throughout that book, no pun intended, are mentions of learning sequence activities. So for each level of the skill learning sequence, I mention specific learning sequence activity pages that are designed to teach and reinforce those skills at that skill level. I have a whole chapter called Making LSAs Work, and it's all about how you can adapt learning sequence activities to fit more naturally into your teaching and to meet the needs of your students. That being said, I'm currently working on a project with Cindy Taggart and Jennifer Bailey where we are revising the materials that have been published for teaching learning sequence activities. We're going back to Dr. Gordon's pattern research, the taxonomies of patterns that he developed, and we are coming up with a newly envisioned version of the materials for learning sequence activities. You may have heard me mention that before. So just thinking, a few years down the road, if LSAs are going to be updated, we're talking like reconfiguring a lot of the pages, redoing a lot of the orders, redoing a lot of the patterns. So a lot of what I have in my book, Weaving It All Together, will be no longer applicable once the new version is out. So at this point, I'm mentioning it because if you are familiar with my book and you have noticed any errors, please email me and let me know. You can reach me at everydaymusicality@gmail.com, and I would love to hear anything you've caught, any typos, any other errors, like I know in the section of the chapter on tonalities and meters where it starts talking about the less common meters. Some of the images got mixed up and I think don't have the proper caption with the proper notation for that meter. So stuff like that. And then also if you'd like to see anything in the second edition, anything you felt was missing from the first edition, like for example, a glossary, or I should say an index of keywords where you could look up the concept and then find out where in the book I talk about it, that kind of would be nice, wouldn't it? So Any suggestions you might have or errors that you've noticed, please send them my way. Again, you can email me at everydaymusicality@gmail.com. Thank you so much in advance. And now let's get into the topic for today's episode. In the last episode, I started a mini-series on the partial synthesis level of the skill learning sequence. If you're not familiar with what the skill learning sequence is, I suggest you familiarize yourself with that before you try to learn about partial synthesis. I'll link in the show notes to the episode I did a long time ago where I gave an overview of the levels of the skill learning sequence. I won't take the time to link to them all again, but I've done previous mini-series of episodes on the oral level of learning and on the verbal association level of learning. You can either search for those on my website, everydaymusicality.com, or you can go to the episode previous to this one, number 61, and I do link to those episodes in the show notes. And then in the previous episode, number 61, I gave an overview of the partial synthesis level of learning, sort of what is the general gist of what's going on at partial synthesis, and what are some things we want to keep in mind if and when we're going to engage our students in learning at the partial synthesis level. Remember that some of those key ideas to keep in mind are, first of all, that partial synthesis is a level of discrimination learning. So students are discriminating between things and they're recognizing things. They're not figuring things out independently. So we have to remember at partial synthesis to always model the answer before we expect students to come up with the answer. We always show them the thinking or model the skill for them and then ask them to recognize it. Another important thing to keep in mind about partial synthesis is that now we're dealing with chunks. We're no longer dealing with individual tonal patterns or individual rhythm patterns. We're dealing with a series of patterns that, when put together in succession, form a greater meaning, a greater whole. They give us a sense of context. So we're not asking students to recognize the tonality or the meter of a pattern, but of a string of patterns together, or of a familiar song or chant, which is made up of patterns, right? And then the third thing to keep in mind is that at partial synthesis, we start to take away the tonal solfege or the rhythm syllables so that students can start to learn to use them as a tool for recognizing tonality or meter. So at partial synthesis, we don't establish context for the students. We don't do the little, for example, tonally at the beginning because that would be giving them the tonal context. Instead, we perform a string of patterns or a song, and then the students are learning to recognize the tonality from that string of patterns or that song, or they're learning to recognize meter. And we're not performing the patterns with solfege when it is a series of patterns. We're not going to go do, mi, so, re, so, do, mi. Because again, that's giving them the answer, right? By telling them the syllables that fit with it. And anyway, the goal of partial synthesis is not for them to explicitly put syllables to every single pattern or group of sounds that they're hearing. The goal of partial synthesis is for them to hear those patterns as a larger whole and to start to sense context based on that whole. It's like holding students' hands so that they are like helped across the bridge toward inference learning. So let's get into rhythm skills learned at the partial synthesis level. In rhythm partial synthesis, students use the rhythm audiation skills they've developed at the oral level and the rhythm syllable and labeling skills they've developed at the verbal association level to begin learning to compare and discriminate between meters. Recognition of those two meters, when compared with one another, is the main goal of partial synthesis, which is why all the rhythm skills practiced at the partial synthesis level may seem pretty much the same thing. They may all seem pretty similar. We might switch up how rhythm partial synthesis activities feel somewhat, where we might vary whether we're asking the students to discriminate between the two meters via two series of rhythm patterns or between two versions of a song or chant in which each of the versions is presented in a different meter. We might also switch up how we ask students to respond. They might name the meter that they're recognizing, duple or triple. They might chant the microbeats that they're audiating, do-day, or do-da-dee. They might show some other way. Maybe when you ask them to show whether they think it's duple or triple, they're holding up 2 fingers for duple and 3 fingers for triple. Or maybe we incorporate some type of manipulative, like a circle that has duple meter on one side and triple meter written on the other side, and the students hold up the side that fits with the meter that they're audiating. But regardless of how the students are responding and whether that response is in relation to a series of patterns or a song or a chant, the ultimate goal is the same, and that is to compare and discriminate between 2 meters. Again, at the partial synthesis level, syllables are not used to perform the musical material, but instead the syllables are used as a tool for recognizing and naming the meter. So you as the teacher shouldn't be performing the musical prompts with syllables. Instead, you're going to perform the prompts on a neutral syllable, or you could perform them on lyrics if it's a song or a chant. And you're going to model the process of using rhythm syllables to discriminate between the 2 meters. Then you would perform the prompts on a neutral syllable for students to discriminate between the meters. By first performing the prompts on a neutral syllable and then talking students through the process of which meter you were audiating and why, you as the teacher are modeling the skill of recognizing and naming the meter before asking students to recognize and name the meter. That providing of the answer is a crucial part of partial synthesis, again, because it's a level of discrimination learning. So we as the teacher should be certain that we always give the answer, that we model how to do the skill for students before we ask them to give it back to us. If we don't do that, then we are unknowingly pushing our students into inference learning. If we just asked students, is this duple or triple, and didn't tell them the answer first, that would be generalization. And there's nothing wrong with doing generalization, as long as that's what you intended to do. I think I mentioned this in the previous activity, but for the first couple years after I took my first GIML Professional Development Levels course, I thought I was teaching rhythm partial synthesis, and I was so excited I was teaching partial synthesis until I took level 2 and realized, oh, that's generalization. I didn't really understand partial synthesis because I wasn't giving the answer. So learn from my mistakes. Going back to syllables, remember it's important that students learn to use rhythm syllables as a tool for discriminating between meters and partial synthesis, because this directly connects to their audiation of rhythmic context. At partial synthesis, we don't really want to do things like teaching students to count for differentiating between meters. And another important thing to remember when engaging students in rhythm partial synthesis is that macro beats need to be kept at the same tempo regardless of meter. We don't want to keep our micro beats at the same tempo and then have our triple macro beats be slower than our duple macro beats, because our students are smart and they will pick up that when the macro beats feel slower, that's triple meter. So we want to keep the tempo of the macro beat the same when we're comparing duple versus triple at partial synthesis. And another thing to keep in mind, if you're going to be creating your own prompts for the students to respond to, if you're going to select series of rhythm patterns to use as the example for duple meter versus triple meter, you need to make sure that each of them uses the same number of durations. Otherwise, for example, let's say your triple meter prompt has more durations in it, a greater number of durations than your duple meter prompt, students can just start to count the number of durations in each. So you don't want them to use counting as a crutch. Make sure each prompt has the same number of durations, and you don't want them to use the tempo of the macro beats as a crutch by listening to faster or slower macro beats. This will all be a little clearer when I model an example for you, so let's do that right now. The most basic way to learn and practice the skill of comparing and discriminating between meters at the partial synthesis level is by just doing it with 2 series of rhythm patterns. Most often, a series of rhythm patterns in MLT is comprised of 3 individual rhythm patterns, each of which are 2 macrobeats long. And those 3 rhythms are performed continuously with no pause between the 3 patterns so that it doesn't break up the sense of meter. Like this. I would come into class and say, all right, friends, today your job is going to be to start to recognize whether you're audiating duple meter or triple meter. Remember, in duple meter, the microbeats are do-day, 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 and in triple meter, the microbeats are do-da-dee, do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Now, today, I'm going to chant some patterns for you and show you whether I'm audiating duple or triple meter, and then it will be your turn, so listen carefully. 1. Ba 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 ba. 2. Ba 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 ba. For the first set of patterns, I was audiating do-day, do-day, do-day. So those patterns were in duple meter. I'll prove it to you. You whisper do-day, 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 do, while I chant it again. Keep going. Do-day, do. Ba 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 ba. Did it fit? Yep, so that set of patterns was in duple meter. The second set of patterns was in triple meter because for those patterns I was audiating do-da-dee, do-da-dee, do-da-dee. I'll prove it to you. You whisper those microbeats while I chant the patterns again. So you're going to whisper do-da-dee, do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Keep it going. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, ba-ba-ba-ba. Do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Did that fit? Yeah, so the second set was in triple meter. Now this time, I'm going to choose one of those 2 sets of patterns, and your job is to decide whether you're audiating do-day, do-day as the microbeats or do-da-dee as the microbeats. Let's try one. I'll model the patterns for you, and then I'm going to ask you what were the microbeats, and you're going to chant the microbeats you audiated. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. What were the microbeats? Did you say do-da-dee, 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 do-da-dee? You were right. So what meter were those patterns in? Triple meter, yes. This time, let's see if you can tell the microbeats. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. What were the microbeats? Did you say do-day, do-day? You were right. That set of patterns was in duple meter. Let's try another one. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. What were the microbeats? Did you say do-day, do-day? Are you sure? Really sure? Totally and completely sure? You better prove it to me. You chant do-day, do-day. Let's see if it fits. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. I wonder, just for kicks, what if we chanted do-da-dee with those patterns? And if it feels totally wrong, then we know you were right and it was duple meter. So you're going to chant do-da-dee, do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Keep going. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Yep, that did not fit. It was do-day, do-day. So those patterns were in duple meter. And then I might do maybe another few times like that with everybody responding as a group. And then when everyone seemed more or less comfortable, I might move to individual students. And instead of asking the group to chant the microbeats they're audiating, I might use one hand to gesture to one student at a time to chant the microbeats that they're audiating. So again, some things to notice about this. I'm only chanting the same 2 series of patterns. I'm not making up any other rhythms at all. It's just those 2 series, and I switch back and forth between the 2. Also, we're using syllables as a tool. I'm not chanting on the syllables or establishing context with the syllables. The students are using them to recognize the meter and to recognize the label, the meter name that would go with those microbeats. Finally, notice that I'm trying to keep them at roughly the same tempo, although I'm second-guessing myself and thinking it's not exactly the same now. And then also, we are keeping the same number of durations. Listen to those patterns again and see if you can count along how many durations in each. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Did you count? Okay, I didn't, because frankly, I didn't bother, because those patterns are pulled straight from the first rhythm partial synthesis learning sequence activity, and those are the patterns that Gordon provided for that LSA. So they should have the same number. I just didn't take the time to sit down and count how many durations in each pattern. I should also mention, too, speaking of LSAs, that the way LSAs are written in the reference handbook for teaching learning sequence activities is that you should chant 2 series in a row. First the duple and then the triple, or first the triple and then the duple, or when they get really good at it, 2 duples in a row or 2 triples in a row to throw them off, and then students would respond with what the meter is. But I just found that, especially at first, that was too much for students to hang on to in their short-term working memory. So I would break it down to just 1 series at a time. Otherwise, I found that by the time I got done chanting the second series, a lot of the kids had already forgotten what the first series was. They forgot what their answer was, and so they just would guess. And that brings to mind another thing that I changed compared to what the directions said. With partial synthesis, they have a 50-50 chance of guessing the meter and getting it correct, right? So if you have them respond by saying the name of the meter, they have a 50-50 chance of just totally guessing and getting it right. That doesn't necessarily prove to me that they really are audiating and recognizing the context. So that's why, at least at first, I have students respond by chanting the microbeats in rhythm. Because if I ask them, what microbeats were you audiating? And they say, do, day, do, day, do, day, very solidly in my tempo, then I know that they were audiating the context. And then it's just a matter of applying the proper name to it. Then I could say, and what meter was that one then? Duple meter. Also, it takes some time at first for kids to get all these labels straight, right? And so I'd rather know that they're solid on the audiation, and then we'll put the right name to it. I'd rather do it that way than asking them the name and taking a chance that they're just guessing or don't really solidly audiate the difference, or are audiating the difference but just get the names messed up. Another technique I like to use at first is that after I model the 2 series of rhythm patterns and talk students through the process of which was which and how I knew based on the microbeats I was audiating, I do like to provide them with that scaffolding for their response that you heard me saying with you a minute ago, where after I finish chanting the series, I might say, what were the microbeats in tempo and in meter? So that way it's very clearly implied that they should chant back their answer in meter. And you might be thinking, well, isn't that giving the answer away? Isn't that making it too easy? Well, first, if it's their first try doing this, I don't want it to be unbelievably hard. I want to break it down so that they can start to get the gist of it and do it successfully. And then, actually, I still got a fair number of kids who I would say something like, what were the microbeats? Do-da-dee, do-da-dee, if they're truly not audiating the difference. And I'm not laughing in like making fun of those kids. I'm just laughing because what seems easy to us, if we are audiating rhythmically, we have to remember that it's not always that easy for kids if they're not audiating. And then another strategy I like to use is what you heard me do, where I asked you to prove your answer. So after the students give their microbeats with syllables, then I'll say, all right, let's prove it. And I'll have them chant with the syllables to see if it fits. And sometimes we'll double check our answer and have them do the wrong microbeats so they can hear that that does not match up. That just sort of confirms for them that their audiation was correct. So that was having the students recognize and label meter of 2 series of rhythm patterns. We might do something similar with a familiar song or chant. Or It could be an unfamiliar song or chant that the students haven't yet learned how to perform, but we're still going to walk them through the process of how we know which meter is which, like this. Okay, class, today I have a chant for you, and I'm going to do it 2 ways. Here's the first way. My mother, your mother live across the way. Every night they have a chat, and this is what they say. Do-day, 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 do-day. In that time, the microbeats I was audiating were do-day, do-day. So that time the chant was in duple meter. Listen this time. My mother, your mother live across the way. Every night they have a chat, and this is what they say. Do-da-dee, 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 do-da-dee. That time the chant was in triple meter, so I was audiating do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Listen one more time. Here's the first one again. My mother, your mother live across the way. Every night they have a chat, and this is what they say. Do-day, do-day, do-day is what I was audiating for the microbeats, so that chant was in duple meter. Now this time, I'm going to say that chant in either duple meter or triple meter. Your job is to listen and decide what microbeats are you audiating. Do-day, or do-da-dee, do-da-dee. And you'll chant those to me at the end. Let's try it. My mother, your mother live across the way. Every night they have a chat, and this is what they say. Do-day, was that your answer? You were correct, because that chant that time was in duple meter. How about this one? My mother, your mother live across the way. Every night they have a chat, and this is what they say. Do-day again. Are you sure? Oh, because you were right. It was in duple meter again. How about this one? My mother, your mother live across the way. Every night they have a chat, and this is what they say. Do-da-dee, were the microbeats, so that time the chant was in triple meter. Nice job. This time I might gesture to individual students to chant the microbeats that they're audiating, so everyone better be ready. And even if I don't ask you what microbeats you were audiating, I might ask you, did you agree with that person? What do you think the meter is then? So be ready, be listening, even if you're not the first person I call on. And then I would proceed with chanting in either duple or triple for the students to respond to. And yes, once I start calling on individual kids, I might not have every single kid answer by chanting on the microbeats. I might give student A the turn to chant their answer on the microbeats, and then I might say to student B, hey B, did you agree with A? How come? So then what was the name of the meter that time? And I do count those as that student's turn. Otherwise, it can get a little time-consuming to have to perform the entire chant for every single student to chant the microbeats to it. So as long as they're paying attention and they're listening to the first student's answer, I trust that when they say they're agreeing or disagreeing, that you can kind of look at their faces to know if they seem confident, like they really were paying attention, or if they're like, yeah, triple meter. And then they sound like they're just guessing. And also in my classroom, I really try to normalize mistakes and that everybody makes mistakes and it's okay. So I might say to a student, for example, were you just guessing? Yeah, okay, let's make sure we're listening next time so that you're going to know the answer for yourself. And just make it okay every now and then for, if a student has that time when they zone out, it's okay if you make a mistake or you don't always know the answer. Just as long as we're also sending the message that everybody's expected to participate in music class. Just a side note also, that chant, My Mother, Your Mother, is from Music Play. And maybe you want to spice it up a little. Maybe instead of just gesturing to individuals to chant their microbeats or to say the name of the meter, maybe you use a toy and whoever you toss that beanie toy to or whatever, they're the one that says the microbeats or the meter name. You could turn it into a game in that way. You could also take an activity like that and make it even more challenging by having students recognize meter in shorter sections of the song or chant. So maybe you only perform one phrase at a time before they chant the microbeats they're audiating. Or maybe you make an activity like that where they have some sort of visual they're holding up, like 2 fingers for duple and 3 fingers for triple. And maybe you change at various points during the chant to see if they change their answer, like this. My mother, your mother live across the way. Every night they have a chat, and this is what they say, to see if they can notice that switch from triple to duple. And again, this is assuming you have modeled both versions of that chant at the beginning, so they have heard you give the answer. You've walked them through how you know it's duple versus how you know it's triple. And now you're just sticking to that familiar chant and you're just switching the meter between duple and triple. We're not pulling in any other rhythms, any other patterns, any other chant or song. That's how we guarantee that this is partial synthesis and not generalization. A quick note about this kind of activity, you just want to make sure that the song or chant you're going to be using has enough rhythmic data to give us the answer. If you were to perform, say, a chant or a song where the rhythm was primarily macro beats, it would be more difficult to figure out the meter. Like, I'm thinking a chant like 2, 4, 6, 8. That part is all macro beats. So if you stopped at that point, what are you audiating? I don't know. We don't really have a whole lot of information. So that's just something to think about, is that whatever you're using as the prompt, or however long you're going in the song or chant before you stop and ask students to recognize the meter, just make sure they've had enough data to be able to come up with the proper context. Another idea where you could have students recognizing the meter of a familiar song or chant. Maybe they've learned the song I Got a Letter, or maybe you are introducing the song I Got a Letter from the Jump Right In books, and you're modeling, I got a letter this morning, due day, due day, due day, due day. And then you'd model it in triple. I got a letter this morning, doo-da-dee, 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 doo-da-dee. So in this instance, we're not using the oh yes, the sung response in that call and response form. Instead, we're having students respond by chanting the appropriate syllables after we've modeled the answer for them. So you could turn that into a little game. Maybe in this game you have an envelope or something playful that's like mail, and you deliver it to individual students after you sing that phrase. I got a letter this morning. And then you hand them the letter near the end of that phrase. I got a letter this morning. Doo-da-dee, doo-da-dee. They would chant the microbeats like that. Ooh, I just had a thought. Maybe this is something you could do while you're passing out materials. I've been supervising student teachers lately, and we've been talking about how we need to have a procedure for how we're going to pass out beanbags or rhythm sticks or scarves or whatever it is. And then also, as much as possible, try to have that procedure involve music making. So this would be a great way, say, to pass out beanbags. You bring a beanbag around to each kid. I got a letter this morning. Then you put it down, they chant the microbeats that they're recognizing, and then you go on to the next kid. That would be pretty fast, where you could pass out the beanbags to a whole class of, 25 kids, and I don't think it would take too long. And that could just be a quick little thing you do to practice some partial synthesis, as long as you've told them the answer previously. And then you could move on to whatever it was you were going to do with the beanbags or the scarves or the whatever. So we've talked about comparing and recognizing meter when we're doing a series of rhythm patterns in duple versus triple. We've talked about how you can use a song or a chant and present it to the students in the two versions, duple versus triple, and have them recognize the meter of the song or chant that you're performing when you switch back and forth in that familiar song. Another way of having students practice at this partial synthesis level rhythmically is to have them match a series of rhythm patterns to the context of a song or chant. So that might look something like this. Remember this song we've been learning, and join me when you remember it. It went like this. Yadadum bum ba-da-dum 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 yadadum bum ba-da-dum bum ba-da-dum. Now you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute, Shouldice, you hypocrite, didn't you say not to establish context at partial synthesis? Yeah, I did. And if we're talking partial synthesis rhythm, I didn't establish the meter. But because I wanted the students to join me in singing this song that is in Dorian tonality, I did establish Dorian tonality, and that's perfectly acceptable. Because in this activity, we might be experiencing Dorian at the aural skill level, so no syllables yet and no labels, but we're doing a rhythm partial synthesis activity. So pretend I just got done singing the song. We just got done singing the song. Bum ba da dum. Listen to my rhythms. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. I'm going to chant those again. This time, try repeating them after me. Try the first one. Ba 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 ba. Now try the second one. Ba 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 ba. Of those two sets of patterns, number 1 and number 2, number 1 is the series that fits better with our song because both the first set of patterns and our song are in triple meter. So the micro beats are do-da-dee, do-da-dee. I'll prove it. You chant the micro beats, do-da-dee, do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Here's the end of our song. Ya-da-dum, bum-ba-da-dum, bum-ba-da-dum, do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. That fit with do-da-dee, do-da-dee. So that set was in triple meter and our song was in triple meter. This time, try chanting those micro beats that fit with the song. Do-da-dee, do-da-dee, do-da-dee. And then I'll chant the second set of patterns and we'll see if that fits or if it sounds completely wrong. So do-da-dee, do-da-dee, do-da. Keep it going. Ya-da-dum, bum-ba-da-dum, bum-ba-da-dum, ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Ooh, that did not fit with do-da-dee, do-da-dee, because that was in duple meter. This time, let's sing our song, and then I'm going to chant those two series of patterns. I might put them in the same order. I might switch them so the second one is first and the first one is second. Your job is to listen to those two series of patterns and show me on your fingers whether number 1 or number 2 fits better with our song. Bum, 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 here we go. Ya-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. Ya-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. If you thought number 1 fit better with our song, you were right because number 1 was in triple meter, just like our song. Do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Try this one. Ya-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. Ya-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Did you say number 2 fit better with the song? You were right, because number 2 was in triple meter. Or maybe I'd mess with you. Maybe I would say, are you sure? Are you really sure? Prove it. This time, you're going to chant those microbeats. Do-da-dee, 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 all the way through our song, and then through both of the series of patterns to see which one it fits with better. Do-da-dee, do-da-dee, keep those going. Ya-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. Ya-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum, bum, ba-da-dum. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Do-da-dee, do-da-dee. Yep, number 2 fit better with our song because both were in triple meter. And again, the key here is that we are not coming up with lots of different rhythm patterns. We're just using those 2 series of rhythm patterns with the song. And we've started by modeling which one fits better with the song and why. And now students are just recognizing that. So that is a little taste of partial synthesis rhythm. Of course, we don't just stop with duple and triple meter. While we're moving duple and triple meter, macrobeat, microbeat functions, division elongation functions, we're moving those through the skill learning sequence. Next, we might go to symbolic association. We might do some more inference learning at generalization, at creativity improvisation. And while that's going on with duple and triple, we're also going to be starting to have students learn other meters starting at the oral level. So they might start to learn uneven paired meter, ba 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 ba, or combined meter, ba 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 ba. So we don't just compare duple and triple, we can add other meters as well as we move those through the skill learning sequence from oral onto verbal association and then to partial synthesis. And of course, with some bridging to inference learning peppered in between. And if you find students struggling with partial synthesis rhythm skills, you might double check, did I really model the answer before I expected students to recognize the meter? If you are consistently giving the answer and students are still struggling, then maybe they just didn't have enough readiness with the prior levels of discrimination learning. So you might go back and try giving them a richer listening and performing vocabulary at the oral level, and more fluency with syllables and labels at verbal association. You might also find that giving students experiences bridging from oral or verbal association to generalization and creativity improvisation can also help prepare them for partial synthesis. Similarly, if your students have struggled at generalization or creativity improvisation bridging from oral or verbal association, you might find that once they have experienced partial synthesis, that in turn will help them be more comfortable at those inference levels of learning. Because by learning to synthesize familiar patterns and familiar music at the partial synthesis level, students will also be better able to, quote, learn to synthesize familiar and unfamiliar patterns in unfamiliar music at the generalization verbal level. That's from page 114 of Gordon's Learning Sequences in Music, the 2012 edition. Partial synthesis also equips students for more meaningful learning at the symbolic association level, which I'm sure we will talk about in future episodes. In the next episode, I will be back to talk again about partial synthesis, but next time we'll talk about activities for tonal learning at the partial synthesis level. In the meantime, if you have questions, comments, suggestions for future episodes, or typos from my book, or ideas for what you'd like to see in a future edition, please get in touch. You can email me or send me a voice memo at everydaymusicality@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and let's keep musicking every day.
Murray, get out of the hamper!